I looked dwarf in front of the mighty Kailasha temple. Still, it's a mystery that how did they do it? People have different kind of theories like aliens and whatnot. If I attribute it to aliens, it means that I'm underestimating my ancestor. My ancestors were certainly powerful guys. So we have been the people where the science has not been divorced from the dharmic ways. Look at this Bharat, the Nalanda University, where so many philosophies and thoughts are being read, dissected,
Nurtured.
debated. In the cultural wars, science do suffer. If history is not put in the right perspective, science will start suffering. Still, there are a lot of population which lives with the belief that Jalaluddin Muhammad Akbar was a great man.
I mean, there are chapters in our history books that use the word Akbar the Great.
And that's so ironical because Akbar itself means the great. So you are saying the great, the great. For the people, young Indians, to really place them, whether they are left wing or right wing, I would say that don't fall for this trap. You should just see that what really works for India, what really works for Bharat. So Savarkar should be seen as a man who was the fountainhead of our freedom movement. Hindutva for all these people was the state of being Hindu. But Savarkar said that this is not a theological thing what I'm talking about. My Hindutva
Asindhu Sindhu Paryanta Yasya Bharata Bhumika Pitrabhu Punya Bhushchaiva Sa Vai Hindu Riti Smita
is a reaction to the political Islam. The notion which he was trying to imbibe into the minds of the Indians.
सिंधु नदी से सागर तक की विशाल भारत भूमि में अपने पूर्वजों की जमीन मातृभूमि यानी अपनी संस्कृति भाषाओं खान पान त्योहारों को अपना माने वो हिंदू है.
And that's the reason why when the interaction between him and Gandhiji happened, whether when he was cooking prawn and the instance so happened that he said that if you can't even eat with us, how will you fight the battle with us?
Namaste and welcome to this episode of the Oddcast Show. Today we have Aabhas Maldahiyar ji with us. He is an architect by profession, but also calls himself a part-time historian. We don't believe that because we feel he's a full-time historian because the kind of wealth of knowledge that he comes to the show with his, the kind of research that he's done and the books that he's written. It's great to have you, Aabhas ji. Namaste. How are you feeling?
Namaste. It's my pleasure to be on your show.
How do you like Pune?
Yeah, Pune is like a second home to me.
Okay, great.
So it always feels to be back to Pune, and it's more like it's very much similar to the vibe what we get in Bangalore in terms of climate. So it always feels
Minus
that,
the traffic.
Yes,
Mhm.
of course. Bangalore will always be the winner for the worst of the traffic.
Right.
You can't beat us there.
They invented work from traffic over there in Bangalore.
Yeah, of
it's
course.
so advanced.
Yeah, it is so. You will find the people writing the stuff in the PC, doing
Right.
coding and all, while
Right.
on the way being stuck in the traffic.
Right.
Yes.
So actually, one of the first question I had is that, we read so much about our own history and we find that a lot of people I talk to nowadays say that our history is severely distorted. And I wanted to delve into that with you. But before that, I just wanted to let our audience know that earlier you were a Marxist, a
Yes.
leftist, a pro-communist,
Yeah.
and then something happened and you switched over to the other side. So can you tell us what happened? What happened there?
Oh yeah, so I do divide my whole literary phase also into the Marxist phase and ex-Marxist phase. Marxist phase is the phase where I was a diehard Marxist. I completely believed in the idea that we need a revolution, as how any communist will aspire to look for. And I believed entirely that somehow our tradition, our culture, whatever ritual we do, whatever signifies my religion, dharma, is all rubbish.
Mm.
This all needs to be thrown into the dustbin. And with that notion, I was growing between the age of, say, 14 to early 20s. And it so happens that when our civilization, when our culture, when our way to live, which is Hinduism, is so open. At times, it takes you to some terrain where there can be fault too. While this looks beautiful, we were just talking offline initially, and I said that it's like a terrain where there's a lot of contours and it's beautiful, it looks gorgeous, that it's so open, it's so accommodating, it just accepts anything. But when you have so much of acceptance, when there's a beauty in the terrain, the moment you slip a bit, the moment you deviate a bit, there's a chances that you will fall into the valley and you will not exist anywhere. It happened with me. And because there was no such pressure that you have to follow the ritual, you have to believe in the God, you have to believe in each and every tradition which we follow in the festival. So I felt that, okay, it's good to be off from it, because a person growing in, say, late 90s in the early 2000s, and you are seeing yourself to be the ally of the science, and then you think that whatever the sadhus have been doing, or whatever the Brahmins or the priest, whoever are there who do the rituals, they are taking you to the path of the superstition. And that's what you learn also from the textbook back then, that India was all about sati pratha, India was all about the caste supremacy, dividing the people in the branch of the caste, and then the caste atrocity will exist. And it all stems out of the tradition of the Hinduism. And when the books have already told you this, and you are ally of the science, or you want to be progressive, and that there's a chances that you will deviate from the path of your ancestors, which is the tradition, which is Hinduism or the Dharma. And it happened with me. And by the time I entered into the architecture school, it was further reinforced. Because architecture education is a place where you are told to explore more and more. You have to explore into the freedom of expression, because you have to imagine, you have to create something. And when you want to create something new, the freedom of expression needs to be absolute, because the design needs to be fabulous. It has to be out of box. And in architecture, we do come across the subjects like theory of design and history of architecture. There you will read about the art movements, which we know as the political movements too, like modernism, postmodernism. And there are very high chances that if you have walked out of your tradition and you are thinking your society to be one of those dark societies, then these ideas will start looking very lucrative. You'll start finding that postmodernism is a brilliant idea. And I, being a very avid reader, I read a lot. So the literature of the postmodernism, deconstructivism, led me to read the work of cultural Marxism, which looked very exciting. It all made sense to me that history is created by the powerful people, because cultural Marxism says that there are two strata. One strata is of the powerful people, and other strata is of the weak people. So the powerful people who are in the society, that tell you that how their history is. And that history is superimposed upon the weak people.
Like in a distortion.
Yes, exactly. So what it does is that it makes you believe that you need to break that historiography, or you need to break the power structure. The moment you will break that power structure, the history of the reality, or the history of the people who are oppressed, who are down in the strata, will come up. Because history is something all about the narratives.
Yeah.
So cultural Marxism was making a lot of sense to me. And I was completely entrenched into it. And that made me believe that, in fact, this revolution needs to come for sure. But as it goes along, we come across the phase of the Anna Hazare movement in 2012, 11, something. And I think that a lot of people were very inspired by that movement.
What exactly was that movement? Can you tell us?
So this movement was about against the corruption of the Congress party largely. It began with that. And though it was entirely hijacked by the Anna Hazare, and though this movement was initially taken by a man named Rajiv Dixit, along with Baba Ramdev.
Okay.
So it was called Swabhiman movement or something. I don't remember the name exactly. But it was that moment which further magnified to become what we know as Anna Andolan or anti-corruption movement. So people had known about the scams done by the Congress. They were exposed to the kind of corruption which was happening in their reign, right from, say, the era of UPA 1. And that led to the debacle of the Congress too. That was one of the major reasons.
Okay.
Yeah. And then in 2012, I got to believe that Arvind Kejriwal is like a messiah to us,
Okay.
because later on he goes on to make a party, Aam Aadmi Party, and I became one of the initial volunteer for Aam Aadmi Party.
Oh, really?
Despite being a very fresh architect, and I gave my 2 months salary as a donation to the party. It was a big thing. When I look back, of course, the amount of money which I gave back then, it looks nothing. It's very small. But imagine the condition of a person who is just freshly into a job.
Yeah.
And he just put it across that 2 mahine ki salary bas de do. You have so much faith in this man.
Yeah.
You are convinced that he is going to bring the change. He looked to me like one socialist leader who is going to change the whole of a thing, and he will bring the revolution. And because it was about Aam Aadmi, as in the general people. But as the thing goes ahead, we come to know that somehow this man Arvind Kejriwal is not a person which we were envisaging him to be. He's much more different than that. And that's the period when I am on a study trip with a few of my students in Ajanta caves and the Ellora caves. And Ellora cave was the first moment of, I would say that it was a moment when I could feel the structures which I sketched in examination for 10 odd marks. We have a subject called History of Architecture in architecture, where we dwell with the past of the architecture, that how architecture began, how it evolved, etc., etc. So in the Indian architecture, you read a bit about the important structures. One of them is the Kailasha temple. So far, I had known Kailasha temple only through the sketches which I had made of them for 10 odd marks in History of Architecture. I never experienced them. But from those 10 odd marks sketch drawn on the examination sheet to looking at it live was a very surreal experience for me.
Definitely.
I looked dwarf in front of the mighty Kailasha temple.
We underestimate how big they are. And
Exactly. We underestimate. And when you walk into that courtyard as in the precinct where the Kailasha temple exists, and there's a whole surrounding around it. There's it's like a valley kind of a setup where you have, because they were cutting the stone.
Yeah.
From the top to bottom, which again is still it's a mystery that how did they do it? People have different kind of theories like aliens and whatnot. A lot of things do come up, but if I attribute it to aliens, it means that I'm underestimating my ancestor. My ancestors were certainly powerful guys. They were the best of the minds in terms of creativity. They were the best of the minds in terms of architecture. And
execution.
In execution, for sure. So that left me with a lot of questions, but still, it was about grandeur. It was about the scale. It was about the articulate detail. Like there's a lot of detailing into the carving which has gone in play. So, but still, something like that had happened in Egypt in the past, has happened in the Greece. So I was okay. theek hai, yahan pe bhi, not a big deal. Of course, it's way larger than that, but still we did something.
Yeah.
I was still okay. The next day when I walked into Ajanta caves, something very strange happened. And so caves are very dark places.
Yeah.
And you can't do the paintings there. But the Ajanta caves are known for its paintings.
Right.
Very detailed painting.
Right.
And back then in 5th, 6th century, the mode of color would be the organic colors. They are the organic colors, which you take out from the plants, flowers, etc. So now organic colors also need light for you to paint.
Right.
And within the caves, you don't have light.
So how do you do it in the cave?
So the only source of light was back then was the fire and the sun. You can't use fire because fire and the organic thing will form carbon, because any organic thing, if you bring fire in front of it, carbon starts forming. It will just get away. You just can't really let an organic paint exist for so long with fire being the source of light. You
Yeah.
can't expose it.
Yeah.
Right now, also, you are not supposed to take flash cameras with the ASI instructions so that the paintings, you don't damage the paintings.
Really?
Yeah.
It's that fragile to light.
Yeah, organic colors. So it may not be that fragile rationally, but they just take the precautions.
Why not? Yes.
Yeah. So this question got to my mind that how did they do it? Because this is a dark place and those paintings are so detailed. I asked the guide, he did not had any answer to it. He could
Right.
not explain me. He said that we never thought about it, nor we.
There's mostly some vague answer by the guide.
Yeah, they will just, they were like that, we just don't know. Because for the first time, someone had asked me that, how did they paint it in the dark places? So in that very evening, I got to meet Professor Deshpande, who is the granddaddy of architecture in that region. He's a very renowned academician of architecture. And post dinner, he showed me a wooden model of Ajanta caves. And it was a sectional model. When I say the sectional model, just to explain to the audience that section is something, when you slice anything from center or anywhere, then when you look at the sliced part, bang on in front of it, it's a section. So when I slice this cup or the mug and then I have an image of it, it's a section.
Right.
So it was a sectional model of it. And in that, I could see what I had experienced there. In the Ajanta caves, you walk in and suddenly there's a ditch kind of thing. There's a bowl. There's a depression inside. And then it goes this way. It's like a U.
Like a bowl?
Like a bowl. So Ajanta cave section is like a bowl.
Okay.
So then he said me that, of course, it was quite evening, so there was still not much light around. Still, he put the curtains and it was very dark inside the room. And then he brought the torch and he poured the water in through that bowl. And he took the torch and just flashed it onto the water. And I could see that the beam of light reflected back. It was very common sense, right? That the light will come in onto the water. It can reflect back. What we know as a Snell's law of reflection.
Physics, yes.
It's a simple reflection. It's a very simple thing. But it triggered me so much that the people whom I thought to be the superstitious one, the fools and whatnot, they were using the so-called Snell's law of reflection to generate the light inside to do the paintings.
Way before it was even created.
Way before it was even created as a law. And it really surprised me because I, as an architect, have always been wondering that if I can use a concept of bringing the light in, can we induce the light? We can do something like that. But we have failed to do something in the real building. But those guys were using it to generate the light. It became as a source of light to them. So 1500 years back, the so-called Snell's law of reflection was being used to generate the light and do the painting. And that was like a turnover moment for me. Because that made me think that if this is one case, there would be multiple such cases in the past. Because it was just a new normal thing to them. So that's why they did not elaborate it. What is very normal in your life, many times you don't elaborate it. That, yeah, aise kiya, waise kiya. When something is very exceptional, you tend to elaborate it. So it's just like a very normal thing to them. That made me pick the Buddhist literature. And the Buddhist literature pushed me to Upanishad. And when you are dwelling into the religious part or the spiritual part, you will get to know the culture and you will get linked with history automatically. So, of course, this was one turning point of my life. And later on, I read the work of Savarkar. I read about the Ayodhya Ram Janmabhoomi movement. And then somehow this idea started looking very important one to me, which looked fringe back then. Like the idea of Hindutva itself was very fringe, but now it began to look like that there's something very essential for the survival of us. It's very essential for carrying forward the civilizational ethos of the civilization, which is too old and a good one. It's not something it's just old. It is a good old civilization.
Okay. Speaking of survival, I will now bring you towards our current modern day youth system, our education system, and its reforms in how it's operating within this field. Number one, I wanted to explain that if there's a certain teenage boy or girl who's certainly getting into politics now, who wants to learn about politics, how to vote, why should I vote, who do I vote for, how to decide who to vote for, please tell us what is a rightist and what is a leftist.
Yeah, so you pose a very interesting question, and I often have failed to see that where do I belong to, whether I am a lefty or a righty,
Hmm.
because I always tend to go back to the basics. That's where I think about something. So when I say left and a right, we need to go back to the basic, that where the left and right began.
Yeah.
So it goes back to Genesis in the French Revolution.
Okay.
So the people who were anti-monarchy sat on the left, and the people who were pro-monarch sat on the right.
Right.
So the people who were pro-monarchy, they were also pro-Abrahamic system, because that's what the monarchy is talking
Yes.
about in that era. It's a bit superstitious too. It's we know the tales of Galileo. What happened to him? He faced the charges for doing something which was not in the line of the church. There are a lot of scientists who were persecuted, or prosecuted and persecuted both, for what they are trying to do. It was said that you are bringing the notion which is against the book. So the people who were sitting on the right were against the likes of the Galileos. I'm using it in a metaphorical term. I'm building a case that they were anti-science people. They were the people who were not the rational one. And the people who were sitting at the left back then, they were for the progress. They're pro Galileos. They are pro the people who were looking to bring the light of science over the darkness of the church, which church has propagated back
So
then.
rationality, basically.
Rationality. Now, when I look at myself and the people who tend to be labeled into so-called right wing or the conservative wing, whatever, today I see that we are actually sitting against those right side sitting people who stood with the monarchy of there back then,
And who were anti-science.
who were anti-science, because our past has been, we have been the people of the science.
Yeah.
Right. When we say that Fibonacci series, even Fibonacci dared not to call it a Fibonacci series. He attributed it to the rishis of India.
Right. Right.
And I got to know it when I was doing my research for my thesis in architecture, which was on role of applied geometry in deriving architectural forms. That's when I read the work of Fibonacci, and I found that he is praising the Indian rishis and the somebody in the western northwestern India to have discovered it. He does not name, but later on I come to know that it's Pingala, Rishi Pingala, who did it in around 5th century BC, where he spoke about this series in Chanda Shastra. What exactly Fibonacci series is. So what I'm trying to say is that we always have been the people who have created the formulas of the science through the proses, through the mantras. We know the curious case of Lilavati, where this poem itself was written to teach a concept, a mathematical concept, to his daughter. That's where this treatise came across.
Right.
So today, if you read it just as a Sanskrit prose, it may look beautiful articulation, but there was science to it. There were people who were trying to explore into it.
Right.
The temples and the religious places were just not for fulfilling the ritual, but they were studies of the
Like the Gurukul system.
the Gurukul system entirely. So we have been the people where the science has not been divorced from the dharmic ways, and perhaps whatever we did stained from the science, because when the Rig Vedic people said that the whole system is in the cyclic order, it was a very scientific way to put it, because what they observed that sun comes again, the moon comes again, the tides in the ocean, they are also very cyclic in nature. That's how the menstruation is also connected. It's a cycle. Everything which is in nature, it's cyclic.
Even time.
So that's why they said the time is cyclic, because which time is nothing but the measure of through the time we are just trying to quantify the cycles. If you look at this way, nothing else.
Correct.
This is exactly what we're doing. The time can never be linear. It's always cyclic.
It doesn't have a start, no end. It's just there.
Yeah. So that made me think that it's very tough to place us anywhere within the left camp or the right camp. For the people, young Indians, to really place them, whether they are left wing or right wing, I would say that don't fall for this trap. You should just see that what really works for India, what really works for Bharat, and it can certainly be understood from the initial ideation of how we were looking at the democracy. Because when our monarchical system too, there's a concept of sabha and samiti in Rig Veda. They talk about it, and even the Rajan, who is heading them, he can be brought down with the power of the people who are in the council. So he is not the absolute power that way.
Yeah.
So we have been practicing a form of a democracy from very long. And the moment we start to relate to it and see that how the traditions existed in the past, we will see that it's very tough to categorize ourselves in the left wing and the right wing. And we can always say that we are very dharmic people, because dharma is again not equal to religion. Dharma is basically
It's
defined.
duty based.
Yeah. Actually, dharma can be defined as a behavioral accord where you tend to follow the rhythm. And rhythm is the cosmic order. And it is said in our books that the rhythm can never be defied even by the devatas. So even our godly figure, as in the gods themselves, the devatas, they also cannot go against the rhythm. So, while in other religious system, the god is the powerful one, here even the god does not have the power to go against the rhythm. So our virtue to look at the things is much more different than the Western construct. So we should just look at how we have grown as a democracy, how we have still, how we still carry forward that flame of the Vedic culture into the society. Still now, there are a lot of things what we do today. It's not because the Western democracy taught us something, but it's because we were that way long before when the Western democracy came into being. So that perspective is very essential for the people to bring into picture.
But my question here, Aabhas ji, is that I understand where you're coming from, that, people today need to know about our history, etc. and all that. But our history is so distorted.
Yeah.
Why is our history so distorted in the first place?
It is distorted because of two reasons. One reason is ignorance. And I always like to give the benefit of doubt to the crime doers too. At least in this case, say that when it comes to historiography, there are many names which we keep taking, say Professor Thapar, say Professor Jha, D.N. Jha. There's a Habib's, Muhammad Habib and his son Irfan Habib. There's a long list of the people. But I do give them benefit of doubt to start with. And they were ignorant. They did not knew about the thing. Apart from this, the other reason, which is very strong one, is cultural Marxism. When India, as everyone wants to look at as, say, the Nehruvians, they want to see that India came into being only in 1947. For them, so if I pick that very perspective, from that perspective, when India's foundation was being laid, I'm not saying that it's my perspective, according to their perspective, when India's foundation was being laid, it was founded on the socialist idea, is what they claim. But I would say that it was based on the cultural Marxist ideas. Nehru was very a hardcore cultural Marxist.
What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I get into this. So cultural Marxism is an idea which was made famous by a man named Gramsci in 1920s. And he was in a jail and he was ideating around that how Marxism can be brought into practice. So that's when the theory of the cultural Marxism came into being. And in cultural Marxism, a notion was set that this strata of the people and the powerful people do control the history and the weak one do follow it. So to bring the revolution, you need to destroy the powerful people. And the moment that is done, the things will start to change. You will have the rule of the people. And
which is what has happened now.
Yeah, and that exactly keeps happening. And so he proposed that we need to bring revolution in this way. And cultural Marxism then creates an idea of intersectionality. And these are the theories which are written already by these people. According to theory of intersectionality, while the world is divided between the oppressed and the oppressor, all the oppressed are in one set and all the oppressor are in one set. They expect that all the oppressed will come together to fight a battle against the oppressor. Even if say that I am the oppressor, you are the oppressed, according to their theory, and somebody else is also an oppressor, though he's not oppressing you, but you will come even against that oppressor. So because this is a set that, and the set has already been pre-decided.
Yeah.
And according to that set, because the point was that I'll pick the example, which is a very important one. The Islam was seen as a global minority. So, and because no one cares for the Hindus, because Christianity was seen as a global majority.
Right.
So there's a global majority and a global minority. So
technically Hinduism is out of the picture.
And not even,
No, we are in between.
they're not even thinking about it. So how they see that now, because there's a global minority, so minorities are always oppressed.
Yeah.
They're always oppressed. This is theory. So when they're always the oppressed people, so the narratives what you create, the representatives of them whom you set.
Yeah.
So what they see that the tussle in India for the history is more about that somehow the Muslim the rulers have been seen as the benevolent one and the great one, right? So they are projected as a representative of the global minority which lives in India. So you have to glorify them by this theory of the intersectionality, because if you throw a stone on them, even those rulers who are the representative of the global minority, it means that you are throwing stones on the global minority. So you're throwing stones on the people who are oppressed.
Theoretically.
Yeah, exactly. So what it does is that it makes you to make a history which will fall in this line where the global minority will always be kept at a pedestal of a ladla beta.
Okay.
Nothing ever, should be done to them. And you can even make the stories to really make the society even more accommodating of them. Because who is oppressed needs to be accommodated.
And what about the global majority?
So global majority is the oppressor, according to the Marxist.
Okay.
They are the monarchical power. They are the people in the power. So it's not that in USSR, a lot of churches were destroyed. USSR, where the Soviet Union existed, a lot of churches were destroyed. They were converted into museums, right? So a lot of acts like that happened. Now, this theory has been set, and we adopted this theory very vehemently when the history books was being written. And this passed on, and a lot of myths got created. So one of the major reason for the history books being distorted was this, that we were working with a narrative to really appease the global minority. And in fact, Dr. Tharoor has gone on record to say about it and while being in conversation either with Harsh Madhusudhan or with Vikram Sampath, that I know that the distortion was there, but because we wanted to create this bhaichara ka concept, so the society can live with immunity and everything is at peace. The
So that
books
there is
were written
harmony
in a
with
certain
it.
way.
Yeah.
And he accepted it. I know that there's a problem, but this was done for a larger purpose, which was to increase or enhance the unity. But if you ask my take on it, unity cannot exist on the edifice of the foundation, which is based on the lies. You can never do that. Foundation need to be a truthful one. Like being an architect, I can say that the foundation is not strong and strength cannot come without the truth.
Right.
If say a certain soil requires a foundation or the raft to have certain strength, you need to give it, or someday it is going to collapse. So that's what we are seeing it today. We never came to the terms with whatever was done in the past. We are still debating that whether Kashi was demolished by Aurangzeb or not, which is absolutely clearly written in very black words. It's not black, it's not gray. It's very clearly explained that what has happened. But still, we tend to debate it when it has happened 3-4 centuries years ago.
So this truth that you're talking about, that has been, that a lot of people claim has been distorted by our history textbooks, rather, by whoever has said this narrative before. Like you said, you were talking about the Marxist part. Is any change being brought to it now?
I don't think that there's much change. We have this habit of getting very happy or excited even if one small change comes. It excites us a lot. It does happen that when you have not been seeing very bright skies, and suddenly if a beam of light or the sun comes, you feel like, oh,
Yeah.
it's just, so we tend to get very excited about it on social medias and the places that सरकार ने तो ये बदल दिया, अब ये हो रहा है, अब तो तांडव हो जाएगा and whatnot. A lot of things are being said.
Ah.
But the reality is that not much has been done.
Right.
Because if we want to really revive, or rather bring the truthfulness of the history, we have to tell the history as the primary sources talk about it. And we have to talk about both the heroes and the villains. Like recently, when BJP government was in power in Karnataka, a thing came up that we will erase Tipu Sultan out of the history books. So erasing is again not a solution, because if you erase Tipu Sultan, then who will talk about the atrocities what he had done? You can't talk about the atrocities unless those villains are there in the picture.
Those characters have to be alive.
This character needs to exist.
Correct.
They need to very much exist.
I mean, that's like shooting a Spider-Man movie without Spider-Man.
Exactly.
Where is Spider-Man? Nobody knows.
Yeah, and you need to really talk about this Joker, right? You need to talk about this character, this Tipu Sultan. You need to talk about everybody who has been the villain. And the best of the warriors, that I get this trend on the social media that we are not very bothered to read about this horrible people like Tipu Sultan, Akbar, etc. We want to read more about the Hindu kings and all. But best of the warriors knew their enemies as much as they knew their strength. So if as much as you want to know about your heroes, you need to know about the villains too, because the Marathas will never have that existence until unless you have seen that what kind of people the Timurids or the Mughals were. Because that was a tussle which made the Marathas great. Just you can't imagine the existence of the Hindavi Swaraj without the battle with the Aurangzeb. It just can't exist.
Correct.
It's really, and so even our notion to look at the history book has been distorted. I'm saying it with a lot of responsibility. The notion itself is distorted. We are not even understanding that what we are trying to do. So the job of history teaching should always be to bring on table the objective facts of a certain period in exactly the way they would have happened. You did not really massage it in a way. It just can happen the way it was. And I've got to a belief right now, or rather I'm convinced that my civilization has been so great. It does not need the buttresses of the story making in some way or other. We can just stick to the truth, and still the things will come out as a glorified way for our civilization. And it has not been done. It's been, say, the third dispensation, and still we don't see much of the initiative to really do good in history writing. At times in the COVID pressure, they try to rationalize the textbook and few chapters were eradicated and etc. They were removed. But we want more and more contents to be added. We want the history books to be massive ones.
Yeah.
And as like, it's so interesting that I forgot the name of the astronaut who had said while he was being given a prize, some very prestigious prize, he said that history is too important to be left to the historians. And it's being said by a man of a science. Astronaut, I am just missing his name. So he said it, that history is too important to be left to the historians. So even the people of the science realize the worth of history. And it is so, it can be so well related in the recent times, because we all know about USSR. And in USSR, the quantum physics was banned. So that's the reason why you will see a lot of books coming from Russia of that era, which will talk about the Newtonian mechanics, but they will not talk about the quantum physics. You don't have a lot of quantum physics books coming from Russia. Yes. You will have I.E. Rudolph, who was the person from that region. He spoke about the Newtonian mechanics. S.L. Loni's work, which is on geometry, and it means everything is related to something what you see by the eyes. What is not being seen by the eyes does not fall in the category of what Marxism want to look at. There's a concept called dialectic determinism. And so this dialectic determinism and materialism is the basic concept of the Marxism.
Okay.
So Lenin wrote a guidebook that how science needs to be read in USSR. So they were reluctant to make the atom bombs too, because because you can't make atom bombs without
that science, yes.
quantum physics. So that's when finally Stalin decided that okay, let's experiment with the nuclear bomb. But after you have got the theories done, please shoot the scientists. It is all on the record. So they hated the quantum physics like anything. So now how USSR developed, how the thing was happening at there, it's a matter of history. But the way they were looking at the science again takes you to realize that what this man was saying, this astronomer whom I was talking about, was very truthful, because in the cultural wars, the science do suffer. If history is not put in the right perspective, science will start suffering. And because their history was not put in right perspective, their history was very Marxist in nature. They were looking at the world. History is what? History is just a worldview which happened in the past. This worldview, what they had subscribed to, was taking them to this regressive path of rejecting the quantum physics. So it becomes very important for the state to really look what their people are reading and what narrative they're reading about the worldviews. So yeah, it's not being changed for that reason.
Can you please tell us who exactly is it? Is he, for the sake of the audience?
About Savarkar?
Yes.
So Savarkar should be seen as a man who was the fountainhead of our freedom movement. If I put it as a starter, there were two people. One of them was Aurobindo Ghosh, and the other man was Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, who is from the land
again
where
distorted in our history.
Yeah.
I'd never heard the name Veer Savarkar in any of my textbooks, as far as I can remember.
Yeah, you have neither I had. So we all have not been told much about Vinayak Damodar Savarkar, or Veer Savarkar as we like to call him. And he wrote a book called The First War of Independence. So earlier that book was known as The Mutiny. And it was always said that it was just the obnoxious Chota Sa Mutiny was there, and it didn't really affect the Britishers to
It didn't spark anything.
Yeah. So, but the truth is that 1857 was like a war. It was a proper war-based strategy. And the people who were in the armies of the British, they had only come across and they said that we will destroy the empire. And of course, there was a fallacies in the policies and how they approached, and the strategy was flawed. So it didn't succeed. So Savarkar saw it as exactly the right modus operandi to throw the British out. So this idea of making the revolutionary movement was inspired from this notion that we can have the people even in the armies who can rebel later on, who can really take over the British government, and they can be thrown out. And in fact, the British made the exit only because of the mutinies, or rather the revolts, which began to happen, of which one of the naval mutiny, the Grand Naval Mutiny of the Bombay, is one of the famous one. So he was constantly working on this idea of the book which he had written to recognize 1857 as the first war of independence. And that idea was taken by all the greats like Bhagat Singh. We talk about Ras Bihari Bose, who founded Azad Hind Fauj, which was taken over by Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. So this was a central theme of whole our movement, revolutionary movement, that you have to get into the army, you have to rebel, cause a big mutiny, take over the arms and destroy them. And so
like a classic military coup, basically.
Yeah. And this is, he thought about it during the World War I, despite he being in the jail. He thought that World War II is a great occasion, and that's why he did not support even the 1942 movement of Mahatma Gandhi. And in fact, that was seen as a great betrayal even by the people like Ambedkar. Ambedkar also said that what Gandhi is doing is a betrayal with the nation, because when whole of the European army and the British army is out there and you're calling for a movement, it is bound to fail. It will never succeed.
Sure.
And it so happened that the 1942 Quit India movement failed so badly that all the big Congress leaders were in the jail, And while Muslim League did not go into the movement, so they were all free. So it gave a lot of fodder for the Pakistan movement, because all the Congress leaders who were opposing the Pakistan
Were all
are
in jail.
sitting in the jail.
Yeah.
So it gave a lot of brownie points to the Muslim League.
Correct.
And the things really worked against the interest of the nation.
Correct.
So, and the other part of the Savarkar, which he's more vilified for, was his Hindutva notion. And that really changed my mind as well about to look at Hindutva. And he wrote a very, it's quite a precise and very brief booklet about Hindutva, where he explains that what Hindutva is and
The whole Hindu thought of doing things.
Yeah, and who, like, Hindutva was the first term coined by Bankim Chandrina Anandamath, and then it was spoken about by Chandranath Basu in 1892. So Hindutva for all these people was the state of being Hindu. When you say Hindu plus Twa, Twa means ness. You can say Hindu, Twa Pratyay is equal to
That
ness.
essence of Hinduism.
Almost like that. But Savarkar said that this is not a theological thing, what I'm talking about. That while Hinduism can exist as a different thing, my Hindutva is a reaction to the political Islam. Because they are in the war against the British, Mahatma Gandhi said that it is a battle against the British. So Indian Muslims who are down there in the south in Mopla or Malabar need to come together to really throw the British out. And if you and he asked the Hindus to be a collaborator to it, and Congress made an alliance with them. And through that treaty, he made them agree that you will fight for the independence of the country.
Okay.
And isn't it so ironical that you are telling an Indian, say that, you know, those Muslims are also Indian, as we want to see them as, and you are saying them that you need to fight for our independence, then we will support you too. So you are trying to do a bargain to safeguard a caliphate of a place where the Muslims of that place are not interesting to retain that caliphate, but the Muslims of Indian South, that is Malabar, have been mobilized. So it was all political in nature, that how the things was working.
Right.
And Savarkar could observe it. He saw there is the mass conversion happening in the Kala Pani where he's staying.
Yeah.
He saw a lot that how political Islam bites back. And the Muslims were even inviting the Afghans to invade country and establish an Islamic empire. Right. So all these observations was going through his eyes. So that's where he came to the point that we need to be equipped to counter this political Islam. And that's where the Hindutva comes into the picture. And it was not based on religion that way. It was not based on the idea that only a Hindu can be anyone who considers India as his Punya Bhumi and a Putra Bhumi can be the Hindu. And that's how he defined it.
He can practice whatever religion he wants.
Yeah.
So what exactly did Veer Savarkar say about a Hindu society that has been so revered that an entire movie has been made on it right now?
Yeah. So in fact, Veer Savarkar's idea was that he wanted the Hindus to come under one belt. Hindu.
Like unite basically.
Yeah. And it reflected also in 1992 at the Ram Janmabhoomi movement. And there's a very famous clip which a journalist has shot, and he was asking the castes of the people.
And he says, "Pehle hum Hindu."
Everyone says Hindu. When they were asked that, what is your caste? Hindu.
अच्छा आप कौन से जात के हैं?
हम हिंदू हैं, खत्री खत्री सबसे पहले हिंदू उसके पीछे जात.
So Hindu was the caste of every Kar Sevak who worked in that Ayodhya Ram Janmabhoomi movement. So coming back to the idea of Savarkar. So Savarkar saw that Hindu society is kind of fragmented with the ideas of the caste right now. And this is giving mileage to the political Islam. Because when it comes to them, they are always united with the concept of Ummah. Ummah is basically a concept of Islamic brotherhood, where all the Muslims come together, irrespective of which community you come from, whether you're Sayyid
or whichever country.
Whichever country. So all are one. So he said that, you know, they are so united by their notion. That is why they are able to propel the political Islam so strongly. And we also need to get united. We also need to be Hindu enough, so that we can really have our own identity, and at the same time, we can have the way our civilizational ethos should be seen as.
Yeah.
And that's why he came up with this idea of Hindutva. And he did a lot of things, including about to stop the caste discrimination. Before Gandhi came into the picture, even He had created a Patit Pavan Mandir, where even a Brahmin needs to come and touch the feet of the priest who is coming from a lower caste. And so the whole system was entirely made in a different way than how a traditional society would look at. But in that period, that was a great way to bring Hindus under one umbrella. So this man, while he's working on to bring this revolution, to bring this mutiny, or say to bring this big military coup
And throw the Brits out,
yeah, and at the same time, he's working on this idea of the Hindutva, because he has come out of a jail on a one condition, that he's not going to be part of the active politics. So he can't really go out and say that I am going to do this revolution. But he was well connected with most of the revolutionaries, and his works were still becoming the I can say this. His notions were the food for thought for all these revolutionaries for very long.
Okay, I would like to take you a little deeper into history. I want to talk about one particular university called the Nalanda University. Please tell us everything that we have to know about it. Why was it so special, and what did it actually contain?
So, Nalanda University is very important university or important place. Let's not call it university. Let's call it a place as a starter, because the end of it really began our dark phases, and the existence of it was our golden phase. So when it existed, we were having the very glorious time.
We were like the golden bird, basically.
Yeah, and the moment it vanished, the things began to change.
Okay.
And
it vanished, as in it was like
it was destroyed.
Okay.
So the history of it goes back, like, as per the archaeology, etc., we have found the remains from before the Christ era. But actively, as per the dating and the inscription, it came into being in around 5th century AD. So when I say that 5th century AD, it means that around 1500 years, 1600 years from now. Yeah.
Okay.
So before present. So, and it was done by the Guptas. That's how the university came into being. And this certainly was a place where almost all the Indic thoughts were studied and discussed. Many Marxists try to make a claim that it was exclusively a Buddhist place. No, that's not true, because Buddhism was also seen as one of the schools of the Hindu thought.
Okay.
It was never seen that
it's separate.
Yeah.
It's a sister concern.
Yeah. So it was always seen that this is one of the philosophies which can coexist with the other philosophies which exist with us. So, and to get into this university, you had to go through a very rigorous test, which the Chinese travelers speak about, Huansang, etc. Everyone has spoken about it. And to get into this university, you had to qualify in 6 Astika school, which is Nyaya, Yoga, Mimamsa, right? You need to know all these things, because what they did at the university, they also dissected these theories or the philosophies. And if you want to talk about certain philosophy, even if you want to be critical of it, you can't do it unless you have known it, right? So most of the Marxist historians, just to set the thing in perspective, don't know anything of Sanskrit. They don't know anything about Pali. They don't know anything of ancient languages. They have not read the primary sources, but still they have an opinion on everything about it, which is ancient, right? So, but they were the greater people, because the scholars of that school studied the subject which they wanted to critique. They were a very adherent student of it. And all these thoughts, whether it's a Jain thought, whether it's a Buddhist thought, whether it's other Astika school of the Hinduism, it all existed under one roof. They debated, they did the Shastrat. And so, just again to bring the thing in the perspective, it is existing in an era when the Europe and the Middle East is infected by the virus of the Crusades and etc.
Yeah, they were butchering each other.
They were butchering each other. And they all say that we come from one school of thought, that is the Abrahamic thought. We all are Abrahamics.
Okay.
Right. So our common Patrick or the father is the Abraham. But still you have got a sword against each other. But look at this Bharat, the Nalanda University, where so many philosophies and thoughts are being read, dissected, debated, nurtured, right? It's all under one roof. But still, you are not with a sword against each other, right? So this was exactly the university culture which people want to talk about. They want to say that how can we not have dissent in JNU, but their dissent is certainly not decent enough to be really compared with what happened in Nalanda. There was Shastra, there was debate, and it did
There was
happen.
dialogue.
Yeah. And that made this university so different. And there had been attempts to destroy it. And one of the most successful attempts which was made by Bakhtiyar Khilji.
Huh.
And a lot of historians try to gloss over it. And according to them, it was destroyed by some Hindus. And
As in, Nalanda University was destroyed by Hindus.
yeah, and those are very interesting tales. I say interesting tales because, see, when you are a Marxist, you are supposed to be rational. That's what you say, that I am a Marxist, I'm a communist because I'm a rational. I don't believe in religion or anything, and I'm a very rational. I'm by the side of science, or I'm by the side of rationality.
Okay.
Right? This is what a Marxist claim. But interestingly, this Marxist historian D.N. Jha, who goes on to use a Tibetan source to make a claim that this Buddhist structure was destroyed by the Hindus. And that text appears around 5 centuries later.
Yes.
And according to that source, there were 2 Hindu monks, Hindu, not Buddhist. He has made the distinction. So they were not given what they wanted from the university. So they got so agitated that they did a havan. And through the havan fire, the whole university burnt. And there's again, this Marxists bring to your table through that Tibetan source that the power of the Buddhist monk was so much that when these bigot Hindus were burning the Nalanda through the Havan fire and through the fire of certain diya or the other lamps, suddenly from the books, water started falling. That was the power of the Buddhism. The water began to fall from those books, and those fire got extinguished because of it. So all these fanciful tales are being propelled by the rationalist Marxist historian as a reality. But they do tend to reject the narrative which has been brought on table by Siraj, who is the person who did the work and that spoke about Bakhtiyar Khilji destroying the university. They say that it cannot be believed as a text, as an authentic thing to that Bakhtiyar destroyed it, because this Bakhtiyar doing it was told to Siraj by a man who was by 2 brothers who were part of a campaign with Bakhtiyar Khilji after 40 years to the incidents, as in it was done in early 1201 or something, and the story is told in 1240. So because it's being told after 40 years, so we can't really believe that this would have happened.
Sorry, which one came first? Which theory came first? The Marxist one or the other one?
The other one. So Marxists are using this theory.
Okay.
Even today.
That because the story was told to Siraj after 40 years from the destruction. So it's very tough to believe that whether those 2 soldiers who were part of the campaign of Bakhtiyar Khilji are telling a truth or a lie. So probably they are telling a lie just to
Whitewash
they are just telling this lie to just कि हमने ये किया, हमने वो किया करके हमने ये destroy कर दिया. That's why those 2 brothers who were part of the campaign of Bakhtiyar Khilji are telling this story to Siraj, who writes his text to explain that this has happened. So that's why they cast a doubt on it. Now, the other reason to cast a doubt, Bakhtiyar Khilji doing it, because the text does not specifically mentions Nalanda.
Okay.
It mentions Vikramshila and Odantapuri, but does not mentions Nalanda. Now, it's practically impossible to go to Odantapuri via Vikramshila unless you have passed through Nalanda.
Sure.
So that's how the route map works.
Right.
So if somebody is coming from a direction where he came from, Bakhtiyar, so he has to pass Nalanda while going to the other place. And while he has destroyed Vikramshila, why he has destroyed Odantapuri, why won't it destroy? And the text literally talks about that the library was burned down. The shaved head Brahmins, this is how they call the Buddhists, the shaved head Brahmins, they also were burned down, and it just got destroyed.
You mean all the gurus, etc., disciples, everyone was burnt.
Yeah, and it was the user term Bihara. So Bihara can be the place where the thing is happening, the Mahavihara, or the place of the university, etc. So because it's not being called as Nalanda, they are doubting it. But logical triangulation, like triangulation is a method which we use a lot in science. But triangulation is something which also needs to be used in historiography. That you need to triangulate everything. That because a person is claiming and telling that after 40 years, that yes, this happened. It's only 40 years. It's not even a big of a gap. And this man has done with Odantapuri, has done with Vikramshila. Why will he leave Nalanda? Then after this, there is one more Buddhist scholar, Tibetan Buddhist scholar, who comes there around 40 years after the instance. He says that he claims that the Turks have destroyed the place. And the place does not exist in its pristine glory as it existed in the past. Now only 2 temples exist. This is what this Tibetan scholar is talking about.
Okay.
Dharma Vasin is the name. I don't recall the name exactly, but it happens after 40, 50 years. So, and he says that we are still very much troubled because of the Turks and the Muslims who come and create problems for us. It's not very much easy to live in the live with the peace in this place. So still the terror exists. So if he's already casting the reason upon the Turks and the Muslims, and he's the only man who has visited this place, how can he be bailed out of this crime? He certainly is a crime doer here. And all the evidences lead us to believe that it was done by Bakhtiyar Khilji. And that's the reason why you have got a place as well, which is known as Bakhtiyarpur, just a station nearby to it.
Right.
But my question here again comes down to the same thing, that okay, if we know that our glorified era was when Nalanda University existed, and our dark ages of this country started when Nalanda was destroyed, why are we still okay to have the name of Bakhtiyarpur still there as the railway station?
Yeah, and this,
I mean, like, what is this? Is this a hangover? Is this something that we just don't want to do? Why are we so acceptful of this?
Or why are we so slow in changing it if not acceptful?
Yeah, and when we were going to the place Nalanda University, and me and Vikram saw it, and we just felt very bad. And the moment we saw that board, Bakhtiyarpur ahead, and it just really did not make any sense to us, because we are reviving the university. University exists again. It has been inaugurated recently, and we are doing so much. Then why not Bakhtiyarpur be renamed back to something else, or the
Renamed back to whatever it was originally.
whatever it was? It just does not take any much to do it. And again, I don't know why they are very reluctant to it. They are not open to do it. What is making them think that if we change it, then what will happen and what not? But neither history supports it to be called a Bakhtiyarpur, nor our sensitivity supports us to really
Absolutely.
see the place as Bakhtiyarpur.
Absolutely.
The man who is reason for one of the destruction which brought us to our dark phases, where thousands and the lakhs of our manuscripts burnt like just anything. It kept burning for the months and the ages. And the land which calls itself Bharat, which also means knowledge, and to some lexicon. So it's tough for us to believe that the man who destroyed the knowledge bank of us is being celebrated, because once you have got a name, it means that he's being celebrated. You may say that, hey, we don't like Bakhtiyar Khilji, but we have a name, and the authorities and administration have all the right to change the name to what it needs to be known. You may not bring it to the original name if you don't want to, but certainly not Bakhtiyarpur. You may call it XYZ, it doesn't hurt me. But you call him Bakhtiyarpur, you are
It hurts
just
us.
trying to rub salt over the big wound. It just can't be tolerated. It's intolerable.
So, Abhasji, the astronaut that you were missing, the name was Dave Harrison, and he's talked about the importance of history. And that's one of the grievances that many people today have against this current government, where they are still unable or reluctant to change our history books back to what it should be. We need to know what our history is. We need to know, what the greatness of Nalanda was. We need to know so many things about the might of the Maratha Empire. Not many people know that the father of our naval history is actually Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Ji. So many people don't know these things. So I think it's very important for that to happen. But before I wish to conclude with you, I have one last question that when we were talking about Savarkarji, one of the things that came to my mind was that he mentioned that it is very important for everyone to unite, which would have prevented this separation on religious basis of two countries, of one country, becoming two and then finally becoming three. And, we could have had a lot more resources to pool together and, become greater sooner. Where do you think we are now? And where do you think we could have been had this not happened, had we listened to Savarkarji? And why our history books only talk about only one person being responsible for our freedom? Why is it so distorted? Like, how can they distort it to that extent?
So Savarkar was a very visionary man, and visionary means someone who can really project what would happen in the future, and he's very clear at it. And that's why his strategies, which could propel from his writings, spoke of that. Even when he was talking about Hindutva, and he initially said that he tried to define Hindu as anybody who sees that India is as Punya Bhumi and Pitra Bhumi as well. That's how he wanted to look it at as. And right now also, when we see the problems, when we see that someone goes on to say Jai Palestine and so on and on to the parliament, and it then tries to justify it, it really hints you to what exactly Savarkar was warning us against. That if, say that a country invades today, imagine for a while that Palestine tries to do something, and say that Palestine geographically would have been geographical setup would have been as such that instead of our good neighbor, say Pakistan, it was Palestine, and Israel was just by the side of it. Imagine Russia to be one of that. And if Pakistan, or say the Palestine, decides to wage a war against us, so this Ummah, which even Dr. Ambedkar had warned about, which Savarkar elaborated even more, right, is a very dangerous thing. And because they will side with those invading forces. And if you're trying to side with the invading forces just because of the religion or the Ummah, it's a trouble for the country. But the moment you say that India is your Pitra Bhumi, or it's a Punya Bhumi, even if you're not able to see it as a Punya Bhumi, but rather it should be that the Masjid or Mazar which exists from here, this should be, you should relate to it. You should forget about that, what is there outside. It shouldn't matter to you. Then the things will start to change. This is what he was envisaging it. And that's the reason why when he said that a lot of people blame Veer Savarkar to be the man behind two-nation theory. But it was started by Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, the founder of Aligarh Muslim University, who said that Hindu and Muslims are two nations. Savarkar only built on it, and he later said that, okay, I understand that these are the two nations, but I want these two nations to live together. I can't see them being separated, even if they're two nations. And he went on to his party, that Hindu Mahasabha, was the only party which stood with the point of view that India is not supposed to be partitioned. Even Congress had agreed to the partition, and so they went on to some agitation also afterwards, where they were put in jail and all these things happened. So they always stood for the Akhand Bharat, for the united country. And the notion which he was trying to imbibe into the minds of the Indians is that you have to really love and worship your motherland. If you do it, everything will be good and fine. And that also takes you to the point of view about the militarization. He was always very pro to the use of the weapons. And that's the reason why when the interaction between him and Gandhiji happened, whether when he was cooking prawn, and the instance so happened that he said that if you can't even eat with us, how will you fight the battle with us? And we want the people to really eat the kaleja of the British, and you are saying that you can't eat this merfish. So his point of view was very contrarian to what Gandhi was looking at. And he then also pursued the idea further that we need to go with the mutinies within the armies. We need to have those people pick the weapons against the British Raj, because he knew that it can never happen without the weapons. And when you already have inculcated the kind of nervous what you have, he had spoken about the threat of the China, which bit us later on in 1960s, early 1960s.
Right.
Yeah. So he knew who the hostile neighbors are and what kind of people they are. So that's the reason why he had always put for the idea that we need to be very well armed. And he cut the point of views of Nehru on this. And somehow, because Gandhi and Savarkar did not come along, certainly Nehru and Savarkar also never come along with the ideas, the notions, and the strategies which need to be the fountainhead of how the new nation would flourish. So he was completely pro at it. And in fact, we find a few citations even to Manekshaw saying that had we heard the words of Savarkar, what happened in China what happened with China won't have happened the way it happened. So it's really unfortunate that we never cared to listen to this visionary man, and we succumbed to the ideas which could only paralyze our nation, whether it was being the soft nation in terms of being armed well enough, or whether it was about the ideas to look at the minorities, because we pushed to give more and more concession to the minorities. And Savarkar was of an idea of absolute secularism. When I say absolute secularism, he said that the majority will ask for any privileges or preferences. Neither then I will not even expect that the minorities should ask for the concession. Everything is a level playing ground for everybody. So we cared for neither of these 2 points in the initial days. And somehow this, though is being done, we somehow have bounced back to the idea which Savarkar had propelled, but we are still not trying to think of it in a very religious line. When I say religious line, I mean to state that we are not looking at it in a point of view of making it as a holistic approach. It still does not reflect in our policies, whether it's about the textbook, whether it's about really creating those the lost, I would say that lost pride of the civilization among the people. It certainly is not of that scale as how it needs to be there. We need to do it. Only then the things will begin to change.
Right. So I think I would like to sum this episode up by saying that our history is severely distorted. We all agree on that. And every generation that reads this history goes further away from our civilizational thought. And I think that it's high time that this government acts on it, because that is one of the needs of the hour. And I think, like, a lot of youth today are also confused and lost as to, what is our real history? Why are certain histories not being taught, or, why are certain chapters omitted? For example, the Ahom dynasty, has defeated the Mughals 17 times. Yeah. And people say that's probably why they're not in history books. In fact, that's the reason they should be. But, probably the history is so distorted because of that. So my request through this channel and through our audience would be to try and please reshape and reclaim our history, and that will ensure our survival in the future. Thank you so much. Namaskar.